Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us again with Model Cities In. I am your host, Ashley Cullen, and I have a treat for you today. We are talking with the director of research with HeartMath, and Dr. Rollin McCraty is going to blow your mind with the insights that we have on inner peace and why it's important. Just so you have a little bit more of an idea of who it is that we're dealing with, Dr. McCraty, would you please tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, okay. Actually, my original career was communication engineering. Used to work for a company nobody's heard of anymore called Motorola. One of the inventing cell phones and things. But then I became what's called psychophysiologist. Psycho meaning psychology, what we think, feel, and how that interfaces with our body, in our physiology, what's going on in our brain, body, heart, nervous system, how that affects how we feel, and vice versa, how we feel, right, affects how we think and the activity in our body. So it's kind of what I do, and I've been doing that for about 30 years, and know a fair amount now about stress and what I think of as uplifting emotions that add energy to our system versus ones that drain energy and cause us to do things that aren't so smart sometimes.
Amazing. So now you all can see why I brought this person in particular to cover this topic. So, when it comes to life, we can very easily get pulled to and fro with the stresses of, I got to be there, I got to do this, I got to make money, I got to do this and that. And it's easy for us to allow these emotions to kind of take over and pull us in a negative direction. But when that happens, there's a lot more that happens below the surface than just that feeling of discomfort. And so, Dr. McCraty, would you let us know a little bit more from a scientific, medical kind of background, what's happening to our bodies when we're experiencing stress?
Well, a lot. Too much to cover in a way, but I'll give a kind of a high level overview. But let's start actually with, this word stress. It gets, thrown out. I'm stressed, or you're stressing me out, or it was a stressful day. All of these types of things that's in our language, or we might say, I got triggered, right?
Hmm.
What we're talking about when we talk about stress is how we feel. It's always a feeling and an emotion. We just use this word stress because it's kind of safe. In other words, I'll weave this together for you here, but it's feelings like frustration, impatience, feeling overwhelmed, feeling fearful, feeling anxiety, worry, anxiety. These are all emotions that cause the word stress that gets used to cover those feelings. Now, it's kind of an interesting thing when for years, there are a lot of organizations that do surveys of lots of people to ask questions about, how they're feeling, what's the sources of stress, and so on. And for a long time, the number one source of stress in people's life was time pressure,
Hmm.
which is actually defined, the way we word it scientifically, the feeling we never have enough time, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's actually how it's defined, right? So it's always the feeling, the emotion.
Hmm.
Now, the reason that this is important to understand is that it's our emotions and our feelings that run the show in terms of the activity inside of our body and nervous system. Now, there are many, many thousands of studies on this topic, but let me just give you an example. You're in a traffic jam, right? And you get impatient and frustrated, just even for a few minutes. Well, that sets in motion at least 1,400, it's actually many more, changes in the chemistry in our body. Hormones that deplete our energy, that increase the aging process. So if we're doing that a lot, we keep, running chemicals through our system that really age us. But then that's one level. There's another level, which is the activity in our brain and within our nervous system. That gets more chaotic when we have these, and things get out of sync, right? Literally. Where on the other hand, if we're feeling things like maybe appreciation because somebody did something nice for us, or kindness, pay it forward. We're extending people compassionate latitude because, we don't know what's going on in their world. Well, that also runs the show in our body, but it sets in motion a very different set of chemistry that renews energy, that improves brain function. We think clearer, the activity in our brain and nervous system, these types of things. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context to why it is so important. Now, most people had to learn about this on their own. They've never really been taught the kind of stuff we're talking about now, actually, about how important emotions are, not only in running, in affecting our own health, our ability to think clearly, perform well, whether we're doing athletics or sports or whatever it might be, are all profoundly impacted. But it's the long term. that where it plays out. If we're, in other words, if we're constantly feeling, getting triggered and feeling these, frustration or anger or anxiety, well, that's keeping the chemistry and the activity in our brain and nervous system in this inefficient state. And that
Mm,
basically increases the aging process over time. So most people don't know that and have never been taught that way. We have a lot more ability and capacity to actually choose, I could say it like this, our emotional diet than people believe or have ever been taught how to do. And there are some actually very simple techniques that allow us to, in the moment, kind of shift from, say, I'll just call it a depleting emotion, one that's depleting our
yeah.
energy and taking us into a dysregulated state. And it's dysregulated, our nervous system's dysregulated. That's when we make bad choices, right?
Mhm.
Like, have you ever been kind of upset with somebody and then you say or blurt out something that was hurtful? You probably didn't even mean, out of that frustration or anger impulse. Well,
Yeah.
there's a term for that. It's called cortical, the top part of our brain that we think gets inhibited, right? So we literally don't think clear. On the other hand, if we have like an inner radio dial, is the way to think of it, or knob, we can change the frequency, right? And I mean that literally. That's another topic when we talk about emotions. So we can choose to say, okay, I'm starting to feel impatient, right? Because there's too many people in line, or you're in a traffic jam, or maybe it's impatient with yourself because you can't remember something or don't know how to, solve a problem or whatever. Really, first step is just, this may sound a little bit odd, but there's a scientific reason for this. We call it heart focused breathing. So you want to pretend you're breathing right here through the center of your chest. Of course, you're really breathing through your mouth and nose, but you can feel like an energy flow coming in through that part of the body. You want to breathe a little bit slower and deeper, but that focus in the center of the chest and the heart is breathing your a little slower and deeper is changing the rhythm of the heart. Now that's important because the heart actually sends more information to the brain than the other way around, right? And the quality, the rhythm of those neural signals going up to the brain go to all the major brain centers, and that helps calm down the brain, takes the intensity out of an emotion. Now there's an advanced step when you're doing this, a slightly advanced step while you're doing the heart focused breathing. Now, on the in breath, draw in a feeling of inner quiet or inner peace or stillness, right? And then now you're starting to consciously change the emotional state. It's not suppressing or denying. That never works. Is this making sense? What I'm
It
trying
definitely
to do?
is. It definitely is. And it's getting my brain excited. I can take it in two different directions. The first thing that you're reminding me of is when I was getting certified in building personal resilience, when you explained it in terms of a car,
Mhm.
that when we are in this cortical inhibition, it's like riding the brake and gas pedal at the same time, and how inefficient use it is of our energy.
Yeah, well,
And
that's like what happens when we allow those. We're all going to have, a wide range of emotions every day. This is not about, not feeling. It's about feeling and becoming more aware of what we're feeling in emotions and how to regulate them. Uh, so when we feel the analogy you're talking about is a really good one because we say we get angry or anxious or fearful, these types of feelings if they're running much, they create this discordance in our inner systems, like driving your car with one foot on the brake and the other foot on the accelerator. Now, we know it's not a good idea to drive your car that way because you're putting a lot more wear and tear on the brakes, right? And it's a jerky ride, which is kind of what goes on inside of us. But think of your gas mileage. A lot of people don't consider that. It goes way down. So we're burning a lot of extra energy. Now, when we're young kids, we have all this boundless energy, until we start realizing, but that even starts getting depleted earlier. We're seeing the surveys all over now in schools and even in youth that these types of emotional stresses are really burning out their energy as well. But especially as we get older, as we become parents, it becomes even more important to look at this through an energy model or what am I doing to my energy? So one of the things is you would know what we teach as a concept here is to think of yourself as having an inner battery, right?
mhm,
Just like your cell phone, right? And you have to charge that battery, and if you use it too much without getting charges, it gets depleted, right? And we're the same way. But the way it shows up in us when we get depleted is we start to get cranky, right, and edgy, and trigger easier, and make poor decisions and these types of things.
yeah. Oh, that's so well said. So, what are the impacts when we put our hands on the steering wheel and we are more in a state of peace and self-regulation when we're choosing to be more full of renewing energy?
Yeah, well, so we use the word self-regulation, kind of a science term. It's a good one. And that really means that we're now in charge of ourselves. I might talk to some people. It's a way to maintain our composure in the midst of chaos, right? Now, that kind of chaos could be anything. It could be a family drama, right? It could be a sporting event, for in sports or athletics and these kind of things. So it's being able to maintain that. Some people would say your center, but it's really your heart center that you're centering from in the work I'm talking about, which is one of the fastest ways to get the brain and heart working together in sync. So we go from a dysregulated inner state to a regulated state. So we're in charge of ourselves. We're in the driver's seat. So many people, you'd probably, it's like they've got a button on their forehead that says, push me, and they react. And
Yeah.
I mean, God, and when I was younger, it was fun, right? You'd find somebody's buttons and have fun pushing, triggering them just to watch them, go. But that,
Kids.
but it's not just kids, it's adults.
Yeah.
That's the thing. We never really learn deeper levels of how to be in charge of ourselves, because when we allow other people to trigger us and upset us, they're in the driver's seat instead of us.
Hmm.
And that's not self-regulation, right? Is that
Yeah,
making sense?
it is. It is. And so, what is needed for us to be able to pull ourselves back on track?
Well, the first step is awareness. I would say knowledge of understanding really the basics of what we're talking about now. That understanding, first of all, that our emotional diet is what's running the show. Even a lot of people think that emotions follow thoughts, right? Well, that's sort of true, but it's not the whole story. Because more often than not, we have these under the radar emotions. They become so common and familiar we're not even aware of them anymore. Like so
Hmm.
many people now are walking around and you can think of it as a low grade anxiety, right?
Hmm.
Or being cynical, or always everything's down slants on everything, right? That's like background music. It's constantly playing in our awareness and our consciousness, and that's biasing our thoughts. So in reality, most times emotions happen first unconsciously and then are causing spinning up thoughts, right? So that's why becoming more aware of the emotions, step one. I mean, for guys, it's a little harder sometimes, right? To be kind of admit and accept what we even have feelings, even.
Yeah.
But that's a problem, because if we're not
Oh,
aware of
yeah.
them, that's what's causing rapid aging and poor decisions, and limiting our own awareness, and a type of intelligence. So self-awareness, start paying attention, right?
Mindfulness. Yeah.
Yeah, I would call it heartfulness.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I love that word. Okay.
yeah,
Heartfulness. I
yeah,
heard
because
that. Yeah.
right, because the mind it's really hard for the mind to see the mind. So we have to kind of get to a new helicopter view, kind of more on an objective. And that's one of the things by doing heart focused breathing. So when we breathe through the heart at a slower rhythm, about 4 or 5 seconds on the in breath, 4 or 5 seconds on the out breath, then we breathe at that rhythm with the heart focus, because we have a literal, what we call resonant frequency. That's an ideal rhythm that the body operates at, that we use less energy, we think better, we have better, if you're into sports or athletics, your sensory motor integration's better, we have faster reaction times, better coordination, on and on it goes. So so building a more of an awareness of this and a consciousness, to just over time, if we practice it enough, it becomes automatic. So we just kind of breathing through this area of the body slower and deeper. So that's really building what's called resilience, or more energy capacity in our system. So we have more to draw on when we need it, but especially so we can take the button off our head and take inner control,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's so true. And one thing that I teach when it comes to this topic of resilience in particular is that we tend to focus on surface level things and, how am I going to get through this? Okay, now how am I going to get through this? But when we focus on our energy below the surface and intentionally build our resilience in general, those inner muscles and practices, it helps to fortify us and strengthen us as we face different challenges that we can't foresee what it's going to be, but we know ourselves and what we're capable of.
Yeah, and then with practice and time, we develop this inner rhythm. It's what we call a coherent rhythm in physiology, or the inner states of our body. Along that starts to develop a new level of inner confidence, that when we
Hmm.
start to know that whatever happens out there, which we don't have control of often, we can deal with it, we can handle it, we can navigate it, or we can navigate our way through it, right? Whether it's on the playground, in the classroom, in the workplace, um, on the playing field, whatever that context might be.
Oh, amazing. Amazing, amazing. So, what can we expect short term and long term when we as individuals, when we shift into a greater sense of peace, I know that from my training that we reach this peak performance. And as you described, it's a global experience. It helps us, with our reaction times, with our focus, with our compassion, patience, confidence. Um, you know, and if you can speak at all from like a medical perspective, like what biology is, being shifted when we as individuals, shift into a more positive space, and also how does that impact the world around us, like on a larger scale,
Right.
when a lot of
Right.
people.
Well, there's a lot in that question.
So I
Um,
just get so excited with
yeah.
this.
Okay. Let me start with the last part of what you were saying.
Okay.
And all right. So when we measure the electrical activity of the body, like we might put electrodes across a person's chest to measure the heartbeat, called the electrocardiogram. Okay. Or we
Hmm.
might put little sensors, electrodes on a person's head to measure what are called brain waves, or the electroencephalograph is a sciencey term for that. You're actually measuring electricity. I mean, it's literal electricity. And whenever you have a flow of electrical current, like these electrodes measure, right, with the heartbeat, the kaboom, it's a very big signal. The heart's measured in what's called millivolts. Brain waves are measured in what's called microvolts, a whole order, 100 times less, right? So the heart's the big player here, electrically speaking, in the body. But when you have these flows of current that we measure with electrodes, you create what's called a magnetic field. Now, most people, I'm sure, with magnets, you stick them on the refrigerator, or if you're, remember in science class, you put them under a glass plate and put iron filings, and you see the shape of a field around that magnet. So when we measure these signals in the body, these magnetic fields that are created, the electrodes don't see the magnetic field. You need a different instrument. They're very measurable, and it's called a magnetometer. It measures magnetic fields. Now, one of the things about magnetic fields is they go through things. This is why cell phones work indoors, right? So we're using
Hmm.
that field to carry information, your voice or your text message, right? But it goes right through the walls and the windows, carrying that information from your phone to the cell tower. You can even be in an elevator and make a cell phone call, right? Right.
Hmm.
So it's a magnetic field. So we're nature and beat us to all this technology stuff. We work the same way. So when we can measure these electrodes on the body, the current flows, well, those magnetic fields are carrying information. They go right through the skin. So we can take a magnetometer and put it out in front of you and measure your heart without ever touching the body, right? And you can back that sensor up quite a few feet and still measure the heart, the magnetic field of the heart. From the brain, it's about an inch. You lose that capacity to detect it. Now it goes farther. That's just our sensitivity to measure it. Now, what we've shown in our lab, actually many years ago now, is that field that we stick the probe out here and measure. That's how I know this is true. I can measure it anytime I want to.
Hmm.
That we can decode the information. It'd be like looking at the text message, right? That our heart's carrying, or your conversation that's being carried. It only has an energetic frequency. Remember, I said earlier, emotions are like frequencies. Well,
Yeah.
in this space, let me say it another way. Actually, what we feel inside, what I was talking about now, doesn't stop at the skin. We are broadcasting our emotions, and we can detect them out here in the space around us. So they have different rhythmic frequencies, with whether we're feeling frustration or anxiety or anger, or we're being kind, right? And caring or appreciative. Very different frequency patterns that we're radiating. Now, so the next step in that line of research then was to say, well, this is pretty neat, right? That we're broadcasting, but are we also receiving? And we were
Hmm.
able to show that there actually is, for most people, until they gain understanding and awareness, this is unconscious and unseen. Well, it's always unseen because you can't see magnetic fields. But now this shouldn't be a surprise to a lot of people listening to this, because we've all experienced it.
Hmm.
Right? You can walk into a room, and even before you catch the person's body language or they say something to the tone of the voice, you feel something's off. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's tension in the air, we say sometimes.
Yeah.
This is what we're feeling. See, our nervous systems are like antennas, big antennas, to these fields that are generated by the hearts and brains of other people. So there's an information exchange that goes on unseen between people. Um, I hope this is making sense.
It is, because then you just brought me into this other direction that I also want to touch on this month. So, going back to what you're saying about this magnetic field and how we can send and receive, how are we able to, cause and create our future, manifest things?
Well, that gets a little more complicated, but it really ultimately starts with self-regulation.
Hmm.
right? Because if we're getting bounced around, by all the inputs and we get triggered by that, and it's not even a big deal anyway, but we spend all this emotional energy and that keeps us, in kind of a lower state of awareness and creativity. So just at a very basic fundamental level, um, well, let me bring in another idea, a concept here in terms of why the information the heart's sending to the brain is so important, in terms of whether we're breathing inner peace or inner stillness or breathing in a feeling of patience, whatever that might be to control our energetic system. In the frontal part of our brain, it's called the frontal cortex. It has a lot of roles, but the main function it gives us actually is what's called foresight.
Hmm.
So what is
Intuition.
foresight? In other words, the ability to understand, to have awareness of and understand how what I do now is going to affect my future, right?
Hmm.
Not a good idea to yell at the boss if you want to keep your job, or the teacher if you're a student, if you don't want to get sent to the principal's office. That's a very basic thing, but this is everything we're choosing in life is going through this filter, except when we are stressed, those emotions, that part of the brain gets taken offline. So we're now operating from the lower part of the brain. And that's the more reactive nature of the brain. So, people that are always, negative and getting frustrated and, unmanaged all the time, well, their frontal part of their brain is not working very well. And they don't have the capacity to see how what the choices I'm making are affecting my future. So that has everything to do with, creating the future you want. I
Hmm.
mean, this is at a very basic level. Then it gets more deeper from there. But does that help answer that question for you? Or
Yeah, yeah, it does.
yeah.
Um, how
You
much
want
time do
to,
we have left?
a couple minutes we can do.
Okay. So, okay, last two questions. Let's make them good. So I want them to hear from you specifically. What are some quick, easy ways that, and I know that we touched on the heart focused breathing, that we can get into a better alignment? And if you could describe, because what I include with the heart focused breathing is the curl your mouth up into a smile when you take those slow, deep breaths, because it fills your chest with like a happy air.
That doesn't hurt because you're adding an intention by doing that.
Hmm.
That's kind of what I was saying earlier. In a way, that's just a neat little trick that you can do. There are lots of things like that. While you're doing the heart focus breathing, pretending you're breathing through the thing, is then the next step is to then, well, like you're saying, you can smile, right? Or now you're choosing to draw in one of those more uplifting feelings, and that might just be calm if you're feeling anxious, or
Hmm.
if you're impatient, when you get edgy energy. Well, then you
Hmm.
might just breathe a feeling of patience, right? Because now that's major changes that's going on in our body when we do this really simple thing. The problem people have is it's not complex. It's remembering to do it,
Hmm.
having the care to do it, to understand how such a profound impact it has not only on our health, our body and our health, but our ability to connect with people, to have friends, in positive relationships and develop those kind of deeper friendships where we got people we can rely on, and feel more connected with. It all stems from these abilities to basically maintain our own inner composure and be aligned with that deeper part of ourselves. We all have a deeper inner voice, and that also has to do with the heart. That's another topic for another day, maybe actually. But the more we can learn to do heart focused breathing and be still inside and calm down the rushed inner energy and rhythms, that allows the voice of our deeper intuition to come through and to hear it. And that's our best, by far our best inner buddy. I mean, that's the one thing we can always trust once we learn that we have that inner voice, but how to distinguish it from just the mind, because
Hmm.
it's they're different tones, if you will.
And the best steps to reach that inner voice versus thoughts.
Well, inner heart focused breathing, and then
Hmm.
just literally breathe of ease, right? And that quietens the noise, the mental and emotional noise as we do that. So then that deeper inner voice can then come through and be heard.
Oh, beautiful. And I'm going to leave you on this one
Okay.
because I'm just so curious. What is the most mind-blowing thing that you have discovered? It could be like big scale, or what have
Well,
you learned?
yeah, well, there's a bunch of things that are pretty mind blowing. And for this conversation, we did a bunch of research on the topic of intuition, knowing things that we don't know how we know it, right?
Hmm.
And there are three types, but what we found on the most important type is that that the heart gets the signal first, that intuitive signal from I'll just call it your higher self or your larger self or whatever, whatever people want to call it, your soul, your spirit. whatever, that signal literally comes into the heart first in a measurable way, and then it sends a measurably different signal to the brain that we then interpret. So this is so central to many of the great teachings of the planet. And I don't just mean spiritual teachings, but of course, those as well. That the heart is the source of wisdom. The heart is the source of courage, right? In other words, what I'm saying here is the heart is far more than just a pump.
Hmm.
And so we got very rigorous studies now that are really showing us that's actually true, and that the heart is that access point to that deeper inner voice of who we really are that connects us with our real true self in essence, and unfolds the straightest path to our own fulfillment, because it kind of knows what's best for us. Where
Uh,
the mind's in, and the mind learns from an early age to be, you know, over ambitious, or we have to have this or that to be happy. And a lot of times, those things that the mind thinks are the very last things that we really need to truly be happy and fulfilled.
Amazing. Dr. McCraty, I always love my conversations with you. Thank you so, so much for making the time to help explain all of this to the model cities and community. I am definitely going to bring you in again because I just always come up with so many questions I want to know. So thank you so much. And I'm going to put your resources, your books, in the links below so that they're able to contact you and find them and learn more. So, and if there's anything else you'd like them to reach out to, resources, anything.
Well, I mean, heartmath.org is our website, and a lot of free resources there. And there's two things I would say that if people want to get started on the journey here to getting the heart and brain in sync, and into their own um, growth in their own level of what we call coherence. Two things. There's a book called Heart Intelligence. It's available in a lot of formats. You can, audiobook and all the different formats. And there's an app simply called the HeartMath app that allows you to actually measure your heart rhythm. And it has a lot more techniques than we talked about today in it. And you get a free trial for a couple of weeks or something like that. Or you can get a sensor and it's free for life. So you can just go to either the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and just HeartMath app and download that and give it a try.
Is that in addition to the Global Coherence app? Because
Yeah,
I have that one.
yeah. The Global Coherent. Yeah, there's three apps. I'm recommending the HeartMath app.
Three apps.
Three primary apps. Well, there actually is four, but three that are mobile. But I'd say the HeartMath app would be a good first step. The Global Coherence app is for group, more planetary work. So that's kind of what people graduate to after learning the basics.
Oh, amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Roland. It is so good to see you and speak with you always. Um, I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
All right. Well, you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, and
Okay.
you too.
All right. Take care.
Bye, 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 bye.